Karen, just to be clear, you didn't do it.
We know who did it, Steve. We know. And we know who spearheaded this cover-up. You all know.
Yes, we do.
If John was beaten up and attacked in that house, who did it?
We don't know.
We don't know.
We don't know. And it's not for us to know. Somebody other than Karen is responsible for that, for the killing of John.
Yeah. Roberta in the truth zone, mic hitting raw. Spotlight shining, she exposing the flaw. Debunking the myth, breaking their facade. This is Glass City, respect the squad. On these NYC blocks where the skyline flex big. Roberta Glass slicing lies with a truth rig. Innocence frosters, your stories unravel. She's a map through the madness of gritty gravel. Glass don't bend and facts don't break. She's the storm that's called, you feel the quake. Exposing tales stitched with crooked seams. Justice in the lens, shattered fake dreams. Screams about killers, painted heroes in disguise. She burning propaganda with fire in her eyes. No glamour for the guilty, she call it straight. She backs victims, the voice stay awake. Stats and receipts, no spin, no clutter. Cold cases whisper, she cuts through the mutter. Truth's her tempo, don't confuse the beat. She's standing for the real while you taking a seat. True crime's a block, facts the artillery. Spinning those lies, yo, she checks that misery. Tabloid tales get smashed, no time to play. She's glass hard, break the false and save the day. True crime's a block, facts the artillery. Spinning those lies, yo, she checks that misery. Tabloid tales get smashed, no time.
Okay, here we are back again on a Saturday, day after closing arguments in Karen Reed's case, to talk about the closing arguments after I've really absorbed them fully, I hope. Hello, Taterbug. Thank you for moderating. Thank you, B Rabbit. Also for being backup moderator. Just me, Dean Walker, Texas Brat, Susan Hicks, Doris. Hello, Cinnabon, Sarah Adams with the great Karen Reed imitation, Tammy and Gizmo. Hello, Markar. Hello, everybody. So I wanted to talk about these closing arguments and really talk about, and I won't, thank you, your latex spouse. Thank you so much. Really won't go too much into playing too much of it. I mean, I won't torture you too much because it really is like, thank you very much, your latex spouse, for supporting the show. I appreciate it. Thank you for moderating and holding down the fort. I appreciate it. I don't want to talk too much about or play too much of Alan Jackson's closing because it really is, as my friend pointed out to me, like abusive. It's such a piece of propaganda, and it kind of like, gives you a bit of a gaslighting feeling listening to it. But I did think it was very brilliant, half a closing argument. About half of it was fantastic, and then it just kind of went off. And he hit really all the big innocence fraud points that you can't miss. I'm going to go into that. Then I'm going to talk about Hank Brennan and his closing argument, which is about as good as a closing argument as I've ever seen. One of the best closing arguments I've seen. There's a few points in it that I wondered why he didn't stress them. It seemed so ready for the taking, to just put it in Karen Reed's face. But he backed down, especially when he's talking about they have a tough decision ahead of them. And he goes through the charges. We'll talk about that, where I thought he went wrong as an advocate for the O'Keefe family and John O'Keefe. So, the way I see the prosecutor is as an advocate for the victim and because the victim has no voice, it is up to people like Hank Brennan to give John O'Keefe a voice and to get the maximum amount of punishment for the one that murdered them. So, that's the way I see it. I don't see the prosecutor's job as to have that's the defense's job, to have a lot of compassion for the one who's accused and on trial. And it's really important for him to be that voice. So this was really just like, Alan Jackson, exercise in full-on innocence fraud. You hit like every single innocence fraud point, blaming the police. As I said, I thought it would be Proctor. It was, and more, every single point. Even exploiting Hank Brennan's mistake. I had a conversation with my girlfriend today about that. Why would Hank Brennan? She was like, he did that on purpose. He knew that those holes were made by the medical examiner. I was like, no lawyer. First of all, he knows that people have been watching the first trial, the second trial. Her defense team has a huge team behind them, not just the defense team, not just all the lawyers, but all the people in the audience if they didn't catch that mistake that day, they would have caught it the next day. And no prosecutor wants to ruin their relationship and the trust that they've built up with the jury. Hopefully they've built up trust with the jury and look like they're trying to sell the jury a bill of goods. That's not true. And it's really the difference between being a prosecutor, and you can see, and I think this is really key, what I could see so clearly from yesterday and today is Hank Brennan is a defense attorney. Now, with a defense attorney, you can be a little bit more free and loose with the facts. As a prosecutor, you have the power of the state behind you. Or sometimes if you're a federal prosecutor, the whole government behind you, the whole USA. So you don't want to, and this is something Adam Lally, boy, do I, the more I see the second trial, the more I also really come to love Adam Lally and really respect everything that he did. Do I think he's great in opening and closing arguments? No, that's not his strength. His strength is keeping to the facts, everything he said out of his mouth. And I know the free Karen readers will be like, well, he said that. No, he said that what they're going to say is, let me finish my sentence. He said that the free Karen readers are going to say, well, he said that the trooper, I think it's Trooper Paul's going to tell you that she, I hope I'm right, backed up at 12:45. That's what Trooper Paul said, not what he said. That's the data they had at the time. So he was just giving them, opening arguments are just like a preview, like a trailer or coming attractions of what's going to happen in the trial. So we're going to go through a little bit of the closing arguments. Before that, Matt to panic. Boy, he put out a burner today, and I want to play it for you. So if you saw Karen Reed like really upset, and we didn't understand why she was so upset over these jury slips. We're like, why is she having a meltdown? It was a full meltdown over the jury slips. And Matt to panic. I'm going to start with that. Found out why. And he has a lawyer's real insight into it. So I thought he put out a burner of a show this morning, and I wanted to show it to you. I thought it was excellent. And it really gives you some insight into why she had such a meltdown with the jury slips. Here it is. Whoa. See, I was actually reviewing it again, so you can see I was right in the middle of it. But let's start at the beginning. We'll start you at the beginning. Here we go.
Good morning, everyone. Usually I take weekends off, but this was such an interesting issue that I had to talk about. So when you think about the verdict form, so the defendant was really upset in open court yesterday about the verdict form. And it's like, why is she so upset? It's the same one. No, it's not. The biggest thing was I looked at him again. In the first trial, there was no misdemeanor OUI. There wasn't on that verdict form.
So what, you think that's going to be good, right? For Karen Reed. That's good for Karen Reed. Misdemeanor OUI, no jail time. Probably, if they all decide on that, they decide on the smallest charge. He's going to explain why it's really bad, really bad. And this is something that probably Adam Lally and Laura McLaughlin held back on. And this is why I say her lawyers are not very good lawyers. They're good fraudsters. It's a difference. They're frauds. They don't they're good at acting dramatically, pounding their fists, being outraged in closing arguments, putting on innocence fraud campaigns, connecting with bloggers. And if what's true is alleged, and I believe it is, that they conspired with Aidan Carney to harass witnesses. Because why would they never call off the dogs and say, hey, wait, we're in charge of the Free Karen Reed Innocence Fraud campaign here, propaganda campaign, or we're advocating for our client. Let's put it in lawyerly talk. Doesn't look good on us that witnesses are being harassed. If they didn't feel that they were being helped by harassing witnesses, why did they didn't put a stop to it? Why is Karen Reed talking to Aidan Carney every day? Why are they continuing to talk to Aidan Carney through the most witness harassment? You don't find anything on their phones like, hey, stop harassing witnesses. Nothing like that was found.
On this one, there is. And this is important because.
So they miss this. Because they don't, knowing the law and lawyering by the law is not what they do. They do straight up bamboozled of the court. That's what they're good at. Alan Jackson and David Yannetti and Alessi. They all missed it. Oh, well, Alessi didn't miss it because he wasn't there. Maybe he would have caught it. Who knows? But I think he's pretty much an innocence fraudster himself.
You need to remember, double jeopardy attaches for crimes you've been acquitted of, but also that you've been convicted of. So think about to last year when the jury was hung on motor vehicle manslaughter 9-3. They didn't even need to find that Officer O'Keefe was struck by a vehicle. All they could have found was the defendant was drunk at the time of the incident, under the influence. Had she been convicted of simply misdemeanor OUI last year by clicking that box, she wouldn't be able to be retried for motor vehicle manslaughter this time. Think about that. Think about the movie Double Jeopardy, where Ashley Judd is told that you can't be convicted of the same crime twice. So had they
caught that the first time, she couldn't have been charged with it this time. That would have been out of the running. She would have paid her little penalty for that. But they held it back. I'm just here to be Karen's inner dialogue. Sarah Adams, thanks. Funny. She does the funniest little. I think I played some of them. If you've caught them, I played a few of them. They're very funny and kept me laughing through the trial. Now it's all over. So listen to this. So listen to how this affects Karen Reed.
The jury could have been like, there was no collision. This was a conspiracy, but she was still drunk. They could have literally checked that box and motor vehicle manslaughter would have been closed for this trial. Think about that. Because think about it. We know that the first jury said 12-0 on murder 2, 12-0 on leaving the scene of the accident. Those are the felonies. They could have convicted her for simple misdemeanor OUI. And there's no retrial because the Commonwealth would have been like, well, we can try for murder again, but do we want that high profile defeat? If they don't believe it, there could be some lesser. But remember, on that verdict form, it's murder 2 or not guilty. On the second charge of the murder of the verdict form, it's motor vehicle manslaughter, involuntary manslaughter, motor vehicle homicide, felony, OUI, liquor and negligence, and misdemeanor OUI. By the defense not asking for that misdemeanor OUI instruction in the first trial, they essentially opened the door for this exact type of situation. So when you see Alan Jackson and Karen Reed talking, and she's like, what is this? And it's like, from my look, Alan Jackson's like, oh my God, did we literally just miss a tactical opportunity? Because if she just got misdemeanor OUI, she probably would have just got straight probation, first time offense. And the Commonwealth might have been like, I don't know, they were really against our murder.
You're right. They were really against our murder case. Maybe we won't retry her. Here, he's going to go on to say if they combine it with something lesser, it's a hefty charge. Take a listen.
Murder case, we might be able to try it again, but I don't even know if they still get there. So when you think about it, it's like that oversight of not having I'm not having misdemeanor OUI in that first case almost guaranteed a second case because the charge of motor vehicle manslaughter kept open. I've long said that's where I think the jury's going to come out. I keep looking at motor vehicle homicide, felony OUI, liquor and negligence, because you don't even need to prove that she was trying to create bodily harm or injury, just driving.
This will drive me crazy. I'll be arguing that how Karen Reed. I mean, I think it's first degree premeditated murder. First of all, I think she turned her wheel in to hit him. First of all, her infotainment system was beeping and flashing at her, telling her she was going to hit something, and she left him there to die. She went into either serious bodily injury or death.
Like an idiot, and she hit the defendant. Hit the alleged victim. That's important. They don't even need to believe that they were in a fight and she meant to do it, just that she did it. And that alcohol played a factor. And that charge actually has some teeth. It's a 2.5 minimum mandatory, 2.5-year prison sentence, up to 15 years. I've long said I think the range for the defendant, if she were to be convicted, would be 5 to 15 years. And
because if she gets 30, you only do 15 anyway in Massachusetts. So I don't know. If you're getting 5 to 10 years, can you do 2? Can you get, right? It's a state crime, so you can get time off for good behavior. So you're doing really 2.5, right? Am I right on that?
And
maybe 3.5.
I think Judge Canoni would give her 5 to 10, which I think would be more than sufficient for Peggy O'Keefe
Here's where I think he goes wrong. I don't think he should talk for Peggy O'Keefe. But anyway, that's Matt Tepanek. Kind of amazing. The options on the jury slip that they missed that last time. It wasn't on there. Thanks, Adam Lally, Laura McLaughlin. That's why I say they're the common star. All stars. Great lawyering. Her team didn't miss it, missed it. Too bad, too sad. Also, crazy. Just a crazy scene at the courthouse. Before I get into all the rest of it and the closing arguments. I know this is about closing arguments, but look at this scene. Hold on. Let me turn on this is like a madness scene in the courthouse, at the courthouse. This is what Judge Canoni has let her trial become, this by getting rid of the extended buffer zone. Absolute madness, Michael Jackson level madness, craziness at the courthouse. Take a listen. And she says that if they make too much noise, she's not going to let them get out of the courthouse. Not that she's going to get rid of the buffer zone or extend the buffer zone again. She's going to keep them in the courthouse and not let them get out on breaks. But because the jury might hear. But just this madness? These people are all waiting for a murder defendant.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Happy Father's Day to all the dads.
And you.
Where's Jack?
Alessi just can't wait. He can't wait to go out, and this is the only time. See, as a lawyer, you work long hours, you work really hard. You don't ever get any kind of public adulation, and they love this. They love it.
All the fathers, and
Look at this nonsense.
the mothers and daughters and sons who support it.
And the sons. You know who would like to be celebrating that? John O'Keefe. But your client killed him. The client that you volunteered. It's not like you're getting paid. It's not a job. You're just volunteering to try to get her off from murder, to further your own career and your own fame. And there's Ingrid, Karen Reed's friend, Ingrid Curtis.
Is Ingrid coming in?
You guys having fun?
You guys having fun? Is this really fun? Do you hear that? The fraud. Okay. Am I missing something at the end here?
Hey, sweetie. Love you.
Wouldn't it be funny if Karen took the wheel and ran them over? I guess that wouldn't be funny. All right. So here's Alan Jackson, starting with all the talking points, using the word justice, making the jury feel that they're taking part in creating justice and writing in injustice when they're really taking part in a huge injustice. Should they acquit her or even charge her, come up with some really lesser crime besides murder too, in my opinion.
There was no collision.
Well, I said this, right? I predicted this. No collision. He's got to get in his groups of threes. So it really gets into the repeat the propaganda into the jurors' heads.
There was no collision. There was no collision. I want to take a minute to start off with thanking you. I want to thank you for your attention. I want to thank you for your patience. I want to thank you for your diligence. This is not an easy undertaking. Most of all, I want to thank you for your courage, because courage is what this moment demands. Not just to listen, but to stare directly at injustice and say, not here, not now, not on our watch.
Right. So he's filling them with positive feelings. Like this would be something really positive. It wouldn't be robbing the O'Keefe family of justice. it wouldn't be letting off a guilty person. It would be doing something really positive and it make you feel really good. So he's filling them with good feelings. Sarah Adams says, I've seen other psychopaths take the wheel. Oh no. Have you? Have you really? Oh boy. Oh boy. Thank you, Sarah.
That's what you're being asked to do. Stare down injustice. I want to start with a simple truth. You folks, not us, nobody else in the courtroom, you folks are the last line of defense. The last line of defense between an innocent woman and a system that has tried to break her, that falsely accused her, that tried mightily to bury the truth. This case.
It's not that she tried to cover up her crime and is a rich woman with a ton of resources and has covered up her crime, accused people falsely. It's that the system tried to beat her, and you could be help. You know, everybody hates the system and hates the man, but she's really the man. She's the man. They're the man. The little people are the O'Keefes and John O'Keefe.
This was corrupted from the start. It was corrupted by biases and conflicts and personal loyalties that you heard about. And most fatally, it was corrupted by a lead investigator whose misconduct infected every single part of this case from the top to the bottom. In our opening comments to you a few weeks ago, we told you what to watch for. We warned you what to watch for. We begged you what to watch for. Watch for the physical evidence. Pay attention to the medical facts. Pay attention to the science and the physics. But also pay attention to the integrity, the very essence, the integrity of the investigation. But you also saw something during the course of the trial that none of us might have expected, something that should sadden us, something that maybe would anger us. On full display, you saw the lengths to which some police officers will go to protect their own at the expense of the rest of us, at the expense of Karen Reed, an innocent woman. Before we...
You can just see her just watching the jury's faces, saying, yeah, this is playing down. She's looking very solemn. She's playing the part of the victim. And at times in Hank Brennan's closing, she has a new prop. She has tissues, and she puts the tissues up to her. She doesn't have to cry. There's no tears. Just she puts the tissues up to her eyeballs, like she doesn't want to disturb her makeup, but she's crying. That's what we're supposed to. It's a pantomime of a cry. There's no real tears.
Examine the evidence in the case, which we will do. We need to understand the very foundation of the entire system of justice in which we operate. It's the bedrock on which this entire system is built. Reasonable doubt. This isn't just a technicality, and it's not a slogan. It's a constitutional shield that protects the innocent and prevents the government from punishing without proof. The Commonwealth has the high burden to prove every single element of every single charge beyond a reasonable doubt and to a moral certainty. As I said, those powerful words are not just some legal jargon. They're your mandate, they're your obligation, they're your community's protection against injustice. In our system of justice, Karen Reed sits here today, presumed innocent, cloaked in the presumption of innocence. That presumption is not fragile. It doesn't just disappear because there's a charge or a badge or a theory. That presumption stands firm unless and until the Commonwealth.
So he's going to push reasonable doubt, but he's also going to change the definition of reasonable doubt to any doubt to 100% certitude, which is not what beyond a reasonable doubt is. It's not beyond any doubt. You have to have it has to be reasonable. And he makes it sound like any doubt.
Clears that high bar, the highest bar the law provides. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt and to a moral certainty. That means at the end of this case, at the end of the trial, you think about one or more of the charges, you think, you know what, maybe that's true. It might be true. Then you vote not guilty. If you think it's possibly true or probably true, your vote must be not guilty. If someone among you thinks it's likely true or even very likely to be true, your vote is not guilty. It's because none of those standards, maybe, might be, possibly, probably, likely, very likely, none of those meets the extraordinary burden of beyond a reasonable doubt and to a moral certainty. A moral certainty means a level of confidence so strong, so incredibly unshakable that you could go home, you would go home, look your loved ones in the eye and say, I am certain. Not probably, not likely. I'm morally certain, and my certainty remains unshakable. The law defines moral certainty as the highest level of certainty known in all human affairs. Think about that. You must be that certain about the entirety, not part of, the entirety of the Commonwealth's case. As we discuss this case, you'll see that the Commonwealth comes.
Well, can't they just pick the facts that they believe? And if they don't believe in the Commonwealth's case, they vote for something lesser? Am I wrong on this? I need a lawyer. I mean, all that, is moral certitude is true, but you can have a unreasonable doubt. You can have an unreasonable doubt. It has to be beyond your doubt has to be reasonable there has to be something very reasonable to
nowhere close to reaching that extreme burden of proof. Ladies and gentlemen, on January 28th, 2022, it was a Friday night. John O'Keefe and Karen Reed made plans to meet up with friends, go out for drinks. You saw through video evidence and eyewitnesses that they were affectionate, they were loving, they were in good spirits throughout that evening. They started off at C.F. McCarthy's, which you've heard about.
Strangely, they didn't walk into the home together. Strangely, they never made it out into the home where they were invited. The car was seen out there. What were they doing?
Eventually made their way over to the Waterfall Bar and Grill. When they got there, the Albert family, they were already there, and they were already drinking. The Albert family, it's been established as a very well-known family in Canton. They've got quite the reputation. Brian Albert was at the Waterfall, a longtime Boston police officer. His wife, Nicole Albert, was there. She was with him. His brother, Chris Albert, was a Canton board selectman. He was there. His wife, Julie Albert, their daughter, Caitlin, and his sister-in-law, Jennifer McCabe.
So he's going to say that basically Brian Higgins came in agitated. This is all his. So he's added drama, a key element. So he's told a different story. So all this needs to be corrected with hard facts, hard, irrefutable facts. And he says that Brian Higgins came in agitated and was warming up, stretching out, warming up. You know, you've all seen Ted Bundy's exercise, pre-murder exercise video. Something like that. You know, just with a few drinks, warming up for his murder 2 hours later. I mean, it's so absurd. Yes, Sarah Adams says she worked at a psych hospital for 6 years. Once a psychopath took the wheel while on pass and had to come back home, so to speak. That's scary. Looks like what Karen reads about. You know, don't you think she's like, she hasn't driven because she can't drive. Is Karen Reed wearing a black dress to her own funeral? I mean, trial. Yeah, she's wearing the same dress, looks like, or the same top. I think she's wearing a skirt and a top. I think actually it's the same dress she wore in that interview. Isn't it that same dress?
Whom you met, and her husband, Matthew McCabe, whom you did not meet. They were all there drinking before John and before Karen ever arrived. But also present at the Waterfall that night was Brian Albert's friend, Brian Higgins. We know that he had a romantic design on Karen. That becomes an incredibly important.
Or Karen had romantic designs on him, excuse me.
Fact, as we discuss the facts of this case. As the bar was closing around midnight, the Alberts invited everybody back to their house. They wanted to keep the night going. But the evidence revealed something interesting, that the invitation to John O'Keefe appears to have been for a different reason, an alternate reason. Think about the video.
Because they wanted to murder him. And then he's going to play this video. This is the part I'm going to cut it off at.
Brian Higgins and what Michael Proctor in his investigation completely and utterly ignored. Higgins was agitated after a day of drinking, agitated that it was John and not Karen. John with Karen, not him. Recall that ominous text that he sent to Karen with her and John standing just feet away. Well, he got no response. And then we see this. That's what Brian Higgins was confronted with following his well text. What of all things starts going through Brian Higgins'
Right, he says
his mind? Where does his mind go? What is he thinking about after seeing this, after witnessing this? He shows you. And if Michael Proctor had been the least bit interested, this video would have shown him too. Take a look.
This is their murder warm-up video. It's how to stretch out. You do it with a partner. It's Brian Higgins' murder warm-up video to come out soon. You do it with a partner. You have a couple of beers first, then you stretch out. You get the muscles limber. You gotta warm up for your murder, right? What is this? They look vicious, don't they? Vicious. Absolutely vicious. Look at Karen Reed. How does she keep a straight face with this nonsense? She knows what happened that night. And I don't know why during the trial, this is also another, why Hank Brennan didn't say, so that's the way that went. It was a full-on innocence fraud. It went through all the innocence fraud points, including the shirt that the state is trying to, they called Hank Brennan a fraud, fully laid it all on, went full scorched earth. I thought it was effective. About halfway through, I was really worried. And then it just kind of, it just went too far out into nutty land. I mean, I know it starts kind of in nutty land, but then it goes into like the science and the experts and that they can't prove a collision, blah, 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 and into Scorty Bello. Not saying he was hit by a car because that's, that kind of thing. Because he was clipped. So that's that. Here's Hank Brennan's beginning, very different. But why did Hank Brennan not say during trial, when he was saying, nobody knows the position of John O'Keefe? No, there's one person who knows. There's one witness, Karen Reed. She knows how John was, where he was standing, how he was standing when she hit him. She knows. Why didn't he point out Karen Reed? I don't get it. Don't get it. But here's his opening. And you can see him look at Peggy O'Keefe before he begins. Right here. And his first job is to humanize John O'Keefe. Hey, funny bunny. If for some stupid reason they get a hung jury, they must move to a third trial. Totally disgusted with this community. I'm disgusted with this judge. It's the worst judge. I mean, when you don't get out on front of these innocence fraud campaigns and get up a good website with a real timeline and real facts pointing to transcripts, court transcripts, and testimony, etc., and talking points that are easily understood, it just gets out of control. The lies get out of control. And because this timeline is so complicated, because Karen Read was mixing everything up, calling people, hanging up, even Hank Brennan gets this element wrong in his closing, says something untrue in his closing. It's very effective, but it's just untrue. There's been no testimony to what he tells the jury. You know, they can't take notes. They can't take it as evidence. But here you see a real difference in Hank Brennan as a defense attorney that played fast and loose with the facts, that don't need to learn them he learned them about 98%, 97%. Didn't need learn them 100%, have them 100% down. And you know, I've caught him in things where I've been like, what? No, wait, no. You know, like waking up the niece at 5. No, that didn't happen. Just before 5, things like that. So yeah, it's really important. And then to get the family to give interviews and get out. There has to be, for an innocence fraud campaign, there has to be a strong counter campaign, right? It's just like anything. And you have to get the press's attention. And when all there is in the press is free Karen Read, free Karen Read, free Karen Read, free Karen Read. Oh, it's such an iffy case. Who knows if any jury will ever convict her of anything. You know, I was listening to John DePietro today. He was saying that the rumor was that she was never going to go to trial. That was the aim of the innocence fraud campaign initially, is to get the charges dropped, get so much public pressure on the Commonwealth that they dropped the charges. That didn't work. So now we're here. You know, the worst thing you can do is sit back and say, you know, I think what happened with the witnesses and the family, they were so traumatized by being attacked that they couldn't act. They couldn't put themselves forward into the public. And you have to. Someone has to, with some authority in the case. And because the Commonwealth can't talk, so they're strapped. But, you know, and then you have people on this side of the fence saying, oh, she didn't mean to do it. It was an accident. I don't even know why she's even being charged with murder 2, not even understanding what the murder 2 charges really are. She didn't have to intend to kill John O'Keefe. She just had to intend to back up. And clearly she intended to back up because her infotainment system was beeping, flashing her, telling she was going to not only back up, but that she was going to hit something. And that something was John O'Keefe in her rear view. And instead she turned the wheel into him. So what is that? So that's not helpful. So yeah, you know, all this has been really, I don't mean to be a bummer. I don't know what the verdict's going to be. I thought, like I said, this was about one of the best closings I've ever seen in a case. But these campaigns are strong. I don't know what's going to happen. I can't predict this jury. I don't know who's on it. I haven't seen their faces. I don't know. I haven't been in the courtroom. I hope so. I hope we're all celebrating next week. I think it would be fantastic. But if it turns badly, if she gets acquitted, or if she gets, you know, just some OUI charge that she does no jail time for, this is why. It's this campaign, this innocence fraud campaign that did it. It's not because it's an iffy case or a hard case to try. Without an innocence fraud campaign, they would have been back 20 minutes, you know, I don't know, max 2.5 hours. It's not a hard case. Her taillight, her smashed taillight, her taillight embedded in John O'Keefe's shirt, John O'Keefe's DNA on the taillight pieces. Her own statements, end of story. and there's no time to plan anything. The car was already on the way to the Sally Port when the search team arrived, so there's no planning of evidence. So it's not an iffy, hard, borderline case. It's a pretty overwhelming case of guilt.
John O'Keefe was 46 years old. 46 years old. He spent his life helping people. He's described as a good man, kind, generous, thoughtful. He was a Boston police officer. He worked to help the community. Everything you've heard about this man, he was a good man. He helped people. When his niece and nephew had nobody, he took them in. He took them in. John O'Keefe seemed to be the type of person who would help anybody at any time. And on January 29th, 2022, John O'Keefe needed some help. He needed help from somebody else. You see, John O'Keefe had just been hit by Karen Reed in front of 34 Fairview Road, and he lay on the ground dying, and he needed help. Someone to reach out a hand, someone to knock on a door, someone to make a phone call to 911, even anonymously, not take responsibility.
And that's like the worst feeling when you're in a helpless situation and your life is on the line and you need help. And it's not coming. And he's putting the jurors in that position, the position of the victim. And it's really, I thought it was a really important part to put John O'Keefe back into this trial, make him the center of this trial again, right here in the closing. Everything's been about Karen Reed, Karen Reed, Karen Reed. And certainly everything that Karen Reed does is all about Karen Reed. And here was someone who was really generous and giving. And that day he needed help. It was a good, really good starting point.
Just to help. And there was only one person in this entire planet who could help him that morning, to give him a chance. Maybe it was a 33% chance if he met the Isaac Wolf of the world. But to give him a chance. And that one person who could help him that morning was this defendant right here, Karen Reed. And she made a decision.
What would you be a juror? What would you be thinking about looking at Karen Reed's smug face during this? And her fake tears. I wonder. Allie's super sticker. They came back and they said they wanted to leave early for the weekend. So either they're, I don't know. Let me know what you think that means. They were all decided and they say come back on Monday, or they're all very divided. Let me know. Let me know what you think. Or there's one person, or I don't know.
In her Lexus with the shattered taillight, debris field all over the front yard, and John O'Keefe lying helpless like a child on the front yard. She made a choice. She didn't call 911. She didn't run to his aid. She didn't knock on a door. She made a decision about herself. In her Lexus, she drove away. She was drunk. She hit.
That's a beautiful comment, Myrna. Through Hank, I heard John O'Keefe's voice yesterday. That's great. I hope the jury heard it. I hope the jury. Here's the difference between the first trial and the second trial. The first trial, it was really unclear. John O'Keefe was dead when he was found. Here, Hank Brennan didn't pussyfoot around it. He let the jury know that when they found him, he was dead, not breathing. He was dead. He was gone. And there's a very, very big difference between the first trial and the second.
Hit him, and she left him to die. She was drunk. She hit him, and she left him to die. Before I go through.
Did you see there, Hank, using that same technique? Let's watch it one more time. Same technique, except it's a repetition of 2, not 3.
And she left him to die. She was drunk. She hit him, and she left him to die. Before I go through and detail the evidence, let's talk a little bit about the evidence as a whole. She was drunk. She was drinking that night. She was drinking McCarthy's with John. She was drinking at the waterfall. Her blood was taken with samples of the retrograde analysis, almost 2 to 3 times the legal limit. She was drunk. She hit him. The timeline in this case is beyond dispute. You can accuse, assault, characterize, malign, twist. The timeline doesn't change. It is data. Data is data. The black box, the forensics from the SD card, we know exactly step by step where they were. We know in that window, she hits him because he never moves again. His healthcare data, the temperature on the battery of the cell phone, the physical evidence, the debris field, the DNA, the hair. And then she left him to die. He had a basal skull fracture, counter coup. You heard all about it when the back of his head hits the ground and the brain comes forward. Dr. Wolf told us the reason why they have level 1 trauma centers around the country is because people can survive this injury if they get help. That's why they have this care. That's why they have these hospitals. But you gotta get help. You gotta get help. And if you don't, you develop symptoms, ecchymosis, raccoon eyes, your brain swells, and you die. She was drunk.
You think they're decided and they're going to talk about it some more, but that's just my guess. Okay.
And that night was a recipe for disaster. But before we get to the drinking, in some ways, the fate of this night was sealed well before that night because John O'Keefe and Karen Reed were in a toxic relationship. This relationship was crumbling. We hear lovey-dovey, and it was crumbling, and we know it. And we know it because a month before, his niece Kaylee talks about when they went to Aruba. It should have been a wonderful event. It was discord. It was fighting. It was aggravation. And when they got back, the discontent was palpable. Miss Reed reaches out to Brian Higgins, text messaging, John O'Keefe.
So I want you to remember that, if she gets acquitted on this, okay, of all charges, including DUI, which I don't even know how they could acquit on that, okay, but okay. Clearly she says on the tape, did Hank play the tape of Karen Reed saying it was her glass, that John O'Keefe grabbed her glass in this trial? Let me know. I wasn't sure if that was one of the clips he played. But we have the civil trial, and that's something I'm going to talk about hopefully tomorrow, if not tomorrow, another day. But the civil case is coming up. And I was thinking about why Karen Reed sold her home. I mean, I know she had to sell it to pay her lawyers, but she didn't buy like a smaller house in Massachusetts. I think that she's not buying any property right now. I don't think she's broke. I don't believe that. But I believe that when, should she, worst case scenario, get acquitted of these charges, she will, buy a house in Florida or something like that to avoid, very much like, she's made this connection between her case and the O.J. Simpson case. There's a case where with a lot of with very fraudulent defense lawyers, right? Theatrical defense lawyers, a guilty defendant, and they blamed it on the police, which, that's what lawyers do, blame the police. So defense lawyers, certainly, and especially innocence fraud campaigns too, which we have in this case. So in that case, O.J. Simpson got acquitted for reasons not connected to the facts of the case. That's what Karen Reed's counting on, is that jurors don't keep their eye on the facts of the case, and that they've heard a lot of the other issues, hatred towards the police, hatred of the system. She's pinned herself as a little person up against the system. Same ditto with OJ with the racial elements. And then he got found responsible civilly. And if that's the case, if she moves to Florida, she would not have to they couldn't repossess her home, et cetera, et cetera. I don't think she will buy another house in Massachusetts. That's if she gets off on this. I think she's gearing up already for the civil case. And in Florida, they let you buy a home and keep some of your assets. It's much more protective of your assets in Florida without knowing every detail of little detail of it. I would think that she would buy a house near her friend Ingrid, who has a home. They live in Atlanta, Georgia, but they have a home in Sarasota, someplace like that. That's what I would be expecting.
The relationship is crumbling, and you heard a little bit about what that relationship was like. Haley, his niece, told you when there was an argument, John would do what John does. He would walk away. She described to you one time, to get away from the scene, he walked into his bedroom, but the defendant wouldn't let it go, pounding on his door, having to get the last word, never letting go of the fight. Kind of mirrors what happens on January 29, 2022.
This is one of the most effective parts, I thought, of the closing. So he connects the fight that Kaylee talks about, John's niece, where John O'Keefe went to his bedroom and closed the door to get away from her, and Karen Reed came bounding back, pounding on the door, screaming to have the last word. He calls the backup the last word, and I thought that Karen Reed moved her car forward, then came back for the last word with a backup, the reverse, 24 miles an hour in reverse, her foot 75% down on the gas pedal. That was her last word. And I thought that was such one of my favorite parts of the closing. I thought it was excellent. Oh, thank you, Nye Johansson. Funny Bunny. Hi, Rena Renee. If convicted, still walks until sentencing. Gross. Really? Even of murder too? Funny Bunny? Let me know. I'm not, I live in New York City. I'm not familiar with Massachusetts law. I was reading tweets where they're like, oh, she will be cuffed and blah, blah, blah. I don't know. I love everybody's optimism. I appreciate it. I just don't know. It's not going to change my feelings about her guilt or her guilt. I'm just going to still think she's guilty if she gets off, just the way I think Casey Anthony or O.J. Simpson are guilty.
And maybe outward appearance, they got along. Maybe sometimes quietly they got along. But behind closed doors, relationships have up and downs. We have a bird's eye view into the relationship on January 28, 2022, because we have the text messages. Not so lovey-dovey. The relationship is almost over. The tensions are simmering beneath the surface. They are not getting along. She believes Mr. Keefe is already halfway out of the relationship and he's not into it anymore. You will read them, you saw them. This relationship was unstable and at its end. And so fast forward.
Another brilliant thing that Alan Jackson did was just he gave, this is really, really slick. He gave the jury the exhibit numbers he wanted them to look at. So every time he brought up, he's like, this is exhibit number, blah, blah. Look at exhibit number, blah, blah, blah. He gave them a roadmap all to acquittal. He gave them the thinking, well, she probably did it, not good enough. You know, he really hammered home. Don't listen to the judge's instructions, listen to my instructions, you know, kind of thing. Pretty slick. Rockstar 60s asking me what happened with the jury. They deliberated for about an hour. Then they came back. They were supposed to stay till 5:30. They came back at 4:30 asking to be let go for the weekend. That's what happened. They asked to be let go early. I don't know. You could think of it very optimistically that they all agree and they want to make it look like they considered it, or they want to think about where they're at on the weekend and they all agree. And they're going to come back with a guilty on all the charges Monday. I don't know. I mean, if this goes into like Monday, Tuesday, that's very good for the, you know, if we get a verdict, I think. But, you know, actually, you know, there's been verdicts, not guilty, guilty in record time. But the longer it goes on, the longer, you know, it looks like we're going into another hung jury. And that would be a shame to not have another resolution. And I wonder if the Commonwealth will try it again after this. I mean, this is.
Or that night. That night, after this discord, after the arguing, they go out and what do? They drink. And they drink a lot. So he drinks a lot, and Karen Reed drinks a lot. You've seen the McCarthy videos. You can call it 6, 7, 8, whatever you want to call it. You can see the shots into the next drinks.
9 drinks. 9 drinks. 7 at CF McCarthy's and 2 at the Waterfall.
More shots into mixed drinks. Count them yourself. Over a half dozen mixed drinks in just a few hours. Sober. And then at the Waterfall, a shot, a mixed drink. Now, it was brought up the Waterfall that there was some type of discord between Brian Higgins and John O'Keefe. They knew each other. They were friends. Brian Higgins' conduct of speaking to Karen Reed is not honorable. It's not. But they were friendly. There was no adversarial relationship. There was no anger between them. What we heard is they barely greeted each other. Could we have slide 1, please? At the Waterfall bar, when you see John O'Keefe come in, here's him barely greeting him. That's him. Mr. Higgins. Barely greeting each other. Reality sometimes is different than argument. This is a celebratory mood. Take that down, please. Celebratory mood. A bunch of friends. They're playing around. They're hugging. They're grappling. This is a fighting technique for a murder 2 hours later. Is that the story? They're practicing their moves to murder John O'Keefe. In the celebratory mood, you don't see any aggravation or animus between Brian Higgins and John O'Keefe. Inevitably, the next morning, Karen Reed is brought to the hospital and they take her blood. Now, the government doesn't have to prove that she was drunk. It is either that she's over the legal limit, 0.08, or she had enough alcohol to affect her ability to operate a motor vehicle safely, but you will know that she was far beyond the legal limit. After the retrograde analysis, almost 2 to 3 times the legal.
2 to 3 times the legal limit. Retrograde analysis of her blood. I mean, and then he plays a clip of her saying she was too fuzzy to drive, essentially. But, the way she drinks is, if you watch her pouring drinks and then complaining about the drinks being weak, this is what I mean by Karen Reed. It's alcohol doesn't touch the sides with her. I'm not saying that she was able to drive, but to get the feeling that she wants from drinking, she's just like, it's, pouring shots into drinks, doubles, like just drinking it down. She never sounds drunk. She never seemed drunk the next day. This is someone who's had a lifetime of a while of, not a lifetime. That would mean she was drinking as a baby, but, a good while drinking hard. And it just doesn't seem to, she wasn't blackout drunk. And this is another thing on people on this side. Calling her blackout drunk. She was clearly not blackout drunk. She knew exactly what happened. Does everybody get, all of Karen Reed's contradictory behavior? So I'll say it one more time. Karen Reed is a person who wants to brag desperately about killing John O'Keefe. Makes her feel really powerful. She still hates him for whatever slight, however he slighted her or she felt slighted by him that night and during the end of their relationship, which it clearly was by all the testimony in this case and the text messages. So Kaylee's testimony, the text messages, clearly it was they were on the outs. So she wants to brag on one hand. On the other hand, she desperately wants to get away with her crime. So we have her telling everyone, I hit him, because she wants to brag. And then saying, I left him at the waterfall. I don't know what happened. Did he get hit by a plow? Another great part where Hank Brennan says that she substituted the plow for her large vehicle because she knows. She didn't say, did he get beat up in the house? And when he also didn't bring up that she text messaged Brian Higgins. I think something at like 11:30. On the 29th, saying he's dead. Is it the 29th? Saying he's dead. John's dead. She didn't say what happened. Did you guys have a fight? Did you kill John O'Keefe? Strangely, she doesn't want to know about John O'Keefe's last moments in the house, last hours in the house. It's nonsense. The conspiracy is such nonsense. You ever notice how uncurious she is about what actually happened? The only thing she wondered, did I hit him? She didn't say, did I? It's all things with her car. Did I run him over in the foot? Did I hit him in the knee? Did I hit him this way? Did I hit him that way? She knows what way she hit him. The only thing that she can imagine is hitting him with her car. Isn't that odd? Did a serial killer come along? Did someone in the house beat him up? She thought of all those things afterwards for the cover-up. But the reason she's not curious at the time, because she knows where she left him, she goes right to him and jumps on him. That's another issue I have with Hank Brennan and his closing. He says that she went to get Jen McCabe because she had to face death. She had no problem facing death. She jumped right on him and lifted up her shirt and lifted up his shirt and rubbed herself on him to warm him up, quote unquote. No fear of John's dead body. None of the fear the other women had. The reason she got Jen McCabe and Carrie Roberts, and originally she wanted Catherine Camarano, but she was working as a nurse. She needed people there as witnesses to discover him, to see her hysteria and surprise at discovering him. And she needed other people to mix it up. Otherwise, what happened? Oh, Karen left him there, and then there's her broken taillight. She needed other people to call 911, to point the finger at, to mix it all up. It's a really important point to understand Karen Reed's psychology. Otherwise, she's all alone there with John O'Keefe's dead body. She's the last person who saw him. Not anymore. What happened? Maybe it was Jen McCabe in the house. Maybe it was this. Maybe it's that. Other people mixing up the scene, confusing, screaming, creating confusion, creating fear, mixing it all up. Probably something that she's done to get away with stuff her whole life. You have to think like a criminal.
Almost 2 to 3 times the legal limit. Now, it's been intimated, not come out and said, that maybe she went home and started drinking after she got home. No evidence, mind you, no evidence. And that somehow that is why she had a high blood alcohol level. It's not appropriate for me to comment on the credit.
Right. Maybe they won't convict her of driving under the... But she was still drunk the next day. They can't say. I mean, I can see them now. I see why they might acquit on alcohol. How do we know that she was drunk at the time? Her blood alcohol wasn't taken at the time. Maybe she drank that night when she got home. Tammy. But she says she was drinking, so if you don't believe Karen Reed, you see her drinking right before she drives, but what, you think she's just going to drink 9 drinks and be okay? I don't know. Tammy, my all-time favorite chapter in all time of trials is Hank calling out the clips and watching Karen Reed face in Roberta Glass Karen Cam, the best. Justice for John. Glad you like the Karen Cam. You guys made that possible. I feel she will be guilty. Good. On Monday, 3:45 p.m. All right, Tammy. 3:45 passes and they don't have a verdict. We're coming to you. All right. Funny Buddy says, clearly Hank pointed out that Karen Reed has to have the last word. He pointed that out brilliantly. I thought so too. It was one of my favorite parts of the closing. I thought it was excellent. I really like how he brought up her personality. It's really key in this crime. If you don't understand Karen Reed's psychopathy, you're not going to understand this crime, and you're not going to understand her behavior.
Of another attorney's argument, so I won't do that. But Karen Reed will do that for her. So if we listen to slide 2, she'll tell you exactly what she thinks about that claim.
My alcohol intake's probably about 5 or 6 or 4. The drinks that they were pouring me at McCarthy's, which is where I consumed most of the alcohol, was the weakest at the time. It tasted just like all soda water with lime.
Slide 3, please.
I wouldn't have gotten on the expressway. I would have gotten on the expressway at 12:15. I mean, it was quiet, the roads were very quiet in San Diego. And I was going, when I've had a few drinks, I drive, I always go extra slow. I know my alerts aren't as sharp as they should be. But I shouldn't be driving.
Do you think she drank when she got home?
She said she shouldn't be driving. I mean, I'll be bewildered, but maybe there's going to be a stickler on the jury who's going to say, well, we couldn't measure it at the time. We don't know. Maybe she was okay to drive. John O'Keefe was letting her drive, and he was a police officer.
When they leave the Waterfall Bar at 12:12, you see a video, you have it in evidence, there's a still photo of John O'Keefe holding a glass not from the Albert's home. He didn't sneak into the house in the cupboards and grab a glass. From the waterfall, you see him with a glass, and in it is a straw. Take a look at that picture. And now from 12/12 on, we virtually have a historian in the data that tells us exactly where he went, exactly step by step where he went. And how do we have that? Well, we know the defendant's car had like a black box, and Dr. Judd Welcher took the data from the black box and downloaded it so you can see the movements and the triggering events. And then Shannon Burgess, well, you don't like what he says, don't attack the data, attack the man. He can be mocked for his LinkedIn profile or his unupdated CV. But what he did is he found a key critical piece of this case that did not exist before. He found it recently, and it was that SD card. The SD card that everybody missed, including the defense expert. Everybody missed it. So as much as you want to make fun of him, Shannon Welcher found the key so that we could have the time and date and location coordinated for an impenetrable timeline that can't be broken. That's what Shannon Burgess did. And so we know.
Taterbug, another one. He thinks that it's going to be guilty verdict. Interesting. I'd love to poll you guys. Roberta, they all drink and drive there, but I think the jury will find her guilty. Hank was excellent. Okay. Hope you're right. Guilty of what, though? It's a lot of options.
On the way from the waterfall to 34 Fairview, Miss Mead is driving drunk. Mr. O'Keefe is in the passenger side of the car, and they're heading their way to 34 Fairview, and they get lost. And now we have more data because John O'Keefe has a cell phone. And I said it at the beginning, it is a historian. Doesn't suffer from bias, doesn't suffer from prejudice, it doesn't suffer from memory loss. It has data on it. And he puts on Waze, high location data, as Ian With would say. And it tells you second by second the speed, the location, the movement. That's what it does. And he has healthcare data on that phone. The healthcare data separately shows his movement. And that is critical. It is critical because it not only shows his movement, it shows when he does not move. That healthcare data is critical. And it's not subject to bias. It's not in dispute. There's no other contrary evidence. It is data. On the way to 34 Fairview, alcohol fuels tension. We know that. And we know from those text messages the tension in that relationship. And then there's a trigger. There is a trigger on the way because they're lost. And when John O'Keefe calls Jen McCabe for directions, Jen McCabe says something that triggers what's going to happen next. Okay, slide 4, please.
Very close to the Alberts. In fact, when Jen was navigating John to the Alberts when I was driving, she said it's near Ashley's house. Ashley and John have hooked up prior to John and I dating.
Okay, there's been no evidence that John put that on speakerphone. She may have found that out after the fact. I don't know where this Ashley's house. I'm not a. I think if Karen Reed is putting out that line, that she's constantly putting out the idea that she's so jealous. I don't buy that she's so jealous. It's obviously, I think that, she did these kind of things, but I don't think that there was a fight about Ashley's mom. I don't know why Hank went here. This is one of my differences. I don't believe this line. I think if they were fighting of anything, the last person he talked to was Kaylee. And that was really the source of tension in the house. We didn't get to hear her testimony. Strangely, the only testimony that Karen Reed called sick on the day that she was set to testify. Certainly a move to show her power. You have to get all ready to go to court, but I decide when you testify, when I'm there. So I think if anything, what was she complaining about that night? If Karina Kalakethis, the snake in the grass friend who was friends with both Karen and John, told police that Karen was complaining that night about the kids. The kids kept them from vacations and took so much of their time, and she wished Peggy O'Keefe would help more with the kids. And apparently the nephew was easier, liked her better, was probably easier to control than Kaylee. Was 12 that time. 12, 13, around that age, 12. All right, yeah. So she was a real source. I mean, John O'Keefe, she went and put her phone that night. She texted John, this is Kaylee, the niece, and told him she was going to bed and put her phone in his room. That's the kind of trust they had. I think he loved those kids. If Karen was going to be jealous of anything, it would be Kaylee, not Ashley, Bella's mom. What did they fight about? The kids. I mean, even the thing that, she wanted to feed them Dunkin' Donuts. Remember, she put that out because she treated them too well. She spoiled them too much. Karen Reed put that out. And John didn't like it. He was too strict and mean. But I think they did fight a lot about the kids. That was the ultimate competition for her attention.
So they travel to 34 Fairview under the duress of this crumbling relationship, fueled by intoxication. We have triggers. Now, we know on their way there, we know from the data, where they went, how they moved. If we look at slide 5, Ian Whiffen showed you a guide. You could enlarge that a little, please. And it shows you with the healthcare data, it registers as flights climb, but it doesn't mean someone's climbing upstairs. What it means is there's an elevation, and he breaks down the.
But, okay, so Curly Girly said, on the other hand, Karen Reed did say on voicemails that night, you're effing another girl. Right, she's putting out the idea that she's so jealous, that he's so bad, right? Look at the text messages. I've been over them before. Look at the text messages. You're not into this. And he's just trying to get away, like, he doesn't want to fight. He doesn't want to talk about it. He wants some time to think. And she won't give him any time away from her. She's on him. Is there someone else? No. And then it goes on. But that's just to keep him on the defensive. I mean, that's part of the cover-up, I think. Part of the cover-up is painting herself that way. That she had reason to be jealous. That Ashley's mom threw her into a rage. I just don't believe it. Meanwhile, and why didn't he bring up the plumber in the closing arguments? She's saying she can't come out because she's texting a plumber. Plumber's over at the house fixing her pipes. He's coming back tomorrow in a blizzard or after a blizzard. I think Richie the plumber exists as a plumber. And she mixed up a little truth with a big lie. But why didn't Hank Brennan ever ask, were there any communications with the plumber on her phone? Then they could start to paint her as a massive liar, all with her own comments that he's used to narrate her own murder trial.
There, the red, the green, down to the stomach. And then the bottom left, that's 34th Fairview. You can see second by second the circles of their route, even the 3-point turn on Cedar Crest. That's what you see. At that point, they've left the bar. Remember, the battery temperature was 82 degrees. They're now in a car. It's now 77 degrees. Think about how accurate the battery temperature is, that it reflects the difference between being in a bar and being in a car. They take a 3-point turn at Cedar Crest. And because of Shannon Burgess and because of Judd Welcher, we have the data, and it's a triggering event. Remember, if there's an acceleration past 30%, it registers data on the car, and that's exactly what happens. Is a 3-point turn, and it all lines up with the cell phone after you synchronize the times. It's that simple. It's nothing complicated. There's nothing tricky. There's nothing devious about it. It's data. They do the 3-point turn, and you can match the cell phone clock with the Lexus clock, and when you do, you can reconcile the difference. There's been a lot of talk, a lot of argument, a lot of fights. Shannon Burgess says 21 to 29 seconds. Mr. DeSorter comes in. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to actually do anything. He wasn't given the invitation to test the data. He just looked at the report and made criticisms like a Monday morning quarterback. But even he, looking at the data, says, well, it's 3 seconds off or 2 seconds. Same window, same time. They have all the arguments we want. They're there, they're together. The data matches up perfectly, perfectly. And so they make their way down to 34 Fairview Road. They don't stop. They don't stop at the driveway. They don't stop. And John O'Keefe gets out of the car. They go to the flagpole, and we know for 2 reasons. One, the data. And secondly, Mr. Nagel and Ms. Mason at Cedar Crest, at that intersection before it goes down to the right, they meet. They let Karen Reed go first. They follow behind in the truck. Now, at this point, Mr. O'Keefe has about 8 more minutes before the beginning of the end of his life. And he's in there.
Send me the link. I didn't hear that in her testimony. Jen McCabe testified Ashley House for directions on car speaker. I think she was talking about her car speaker, not his. That's why Karen Reed calls him a perv 4 minutes after hitting him. I'm not on board with it, but send me the link. Send me the link where Jen McCabe says that it was going through the car speaker on Karen's car, not her car.
That car. He's in
And I'll do a mea culpa if I'm wrong.
that car for most of it. Because Ms. Mason and Mr. Nagel don't see anybody get out of the truck. Nobody crosses the line.
And thank you, Hazy, thank you for the super chat.
Nobody goes to a garage, not just because they didn't see it. They didn't. Not because they didn't see it. Because the healthcare data on the phone shows that John O'Keefe is not moving. The car is stopped at the flagpole. The healthcare data stops. The battery stays at 77 degrees. The data is the data. You can't change it as much as you want to. It's data. And they sit at that flagpole for minutes. It's 12, 24, 33 when they get there. They're there past 12:30. Remember, Ms. Mason and Ms. Nagel said they're there about 5 minutes and then they go. It's not exact, but about 5 minutes, they said. So there's about 2 minutes left for John O'Keefe. And what are they doing in those 2 minutes? What are the last 2 minutes of his life that he can remember that would be open to him? They're arguing. They're arguing. They're arguing. And we know they're arguing because Ms. Reed tells us through first responder Becker. She was sad. Remember, he sees her in the back of the ambulance and he's trying to calm her down. She was sad because her last moments were arguing. They're in an argument. That's why they're not going in the house. But John O'Keefe decides to get out of the car. And we know because the dome light goes on. That's what happens when you open a door. Whether he's bent down, he's standing outside or on the other side, the dome light is on. And then you see the data. John O'Keefe begins to move. 12:31:56. It's the first time he has moved since they got to the flagpole, and it will be the last time he moves in his life. And he moves for 20 seconds. Ian Whiffen said that the satellites, they move, they reconnect, they pull information. He's no longer on high frequency data because waves are shut off. Now it's
Look at the difference here. Look at Karen Reed and look at Peggy O'Keefe. I remember this when I was watching this live. Look at the difference between he's talking about the last 20 seconds of Karen Reed's boyfriend. I mean, she's already said she didn't love him. She was asked if she loved him. She said, no, we were dating. She says no really quickly, but she says, no, we were dating. There's Karen. There's Peggy O'Keefe. There's real grief. There's fake grief. And contempt for the whole process. I mean, she has just such contempt. There's the one lip raised for Hank Brennan and the Commonwealth, and how dare they hold her responsible for her own behavior.
more random, it's low frequency. We would never suggest, and Mr. Whiffen did not claim, based on location data alone, at that point, you can tell exactly what John O'Keefe is. What he said is it was readings all night. The bullet is always near the flagpole. That doesn't mean he was always near the flagpole. He could have moved. He could have moved in the circles, come back. Location data is consistent with him never leaving the flagpole. But that in itself is not enough. But there's more. There is more. There is the healthcare data. There is the temperature of the cell phone battery. And so he moves to 20 seconds. It turns west. It does not say he walks to the.
So I had it out with last night, my night off with the free card readers on X. Going back and forth with them. They think this health data, I was like, they think it's just inaccurate. Strangely inaccurate. They think the SD card was destroyed and you can't trust the data. They do not trust the data. It's all a big conspiracy. Proctor somehow put microscopic pieces of taillight in John O'Keefe's clothes. Proctor did this. Proctor somehow magically, and the car was in the Sally port when the CERT team was on its way. You know, they at the scene. Proctor came back later to the scene and planted taillight and the straw, the glass. It's wild, wild thinking. Carmel O'Reilly says Hank left it all in the courtroom. Even if Karen Reed is acquitted, Hank could do no more. Okay, thank you very much. Jack D65 says this is for a cup of coffee, a strong pour. Thank you. I need a strong pour. Thank you. Yeah, notice that no other witness said that the drinks are so weak. Those two bars.
The house. That's not what the data says. It doesn't say that he goes straight line and he walks over to the door. In fact, could he even get to the door in 75 feet? Could he get there? Because when the investigator for the defense testified, he measures from the driveway. He never stopped at the driveway. He never measures from the flagpole. He never measures from the flagpole to the garage door. So this fantasy that somehow he walked in the garage, even though there's no evidence, there's no witness, there's no data. 20 seconds of his life, and he moves. And healthcare data registers his steps. It could be pacing. It could be a straight line. It could be shaking the phone. We don't know. We don't know. We don't know everything. We don't know every little detail and every little second. We don't have to. That's not doubt. That's not reasonable doubt. We know for that 20 seconds, he's moving. And in that 20-second window, when he moves, he has his phone and he looks down, 12:32:09, he sees a text message from his friend, John McCabe. And he looks at the text message and he closes it. And then it happens. We know from the uncontroverted data from that black box, we know that Karen Reed, after he gets out of the car, drives away. She drives for at least 33 feet away from him. He's back near the flagpole. She's gone. It's over. Whatever argument is over. Whatever anger and flame has been dispassioned, she's moved on. He's separate from her. He's safe.
Something about his movement, right? That keeps you really engaged and strangely makes you feel that you're like a part of his closing argument. The fact that he's moving and talking right to you. He's not reading from a script at a podium with the podium dividing, between you and the jury or you and the audience. I mean, even I'm watching through a screen. It feels like he's talking right to you, doesn't it? Like we're with you, Hank. We're with you. And he's telling the story. This is what he did in the opening that was so effective, and it's very effective in closing. He's telling you the story.
And then she makes
He's telling you what all the data means.
decision. That's what this case is about. Then she makes a decision. She could have driven home. She could have broken up with him. They could have talked about it the next day. Or like knocking on the door, like Kaylee said, getting the last word. She doesn't drive away.
This is such an effective point right here. I'm going to go back. She has to have the last word. She has to have the last word. Curly Girly, thank you. Roberta, thank you for having the courage to tell the truth about this case. You're welcome. Do you think Karen Reed, Alan Jackson, or Yannetti will face witness intimidation charges? Well, I don't think they're going to give her witness intimidation if she gets convicted of something very serious. Do you think they're going to bother? Maybe. Not Alan Jackson and David Yannetti. Because when do we see lawyers ever prosecuted for crimes in this country? Very, very rarely. Very rarely. I mean, you talk about the power of the police. I mean, the power of policemen go way down more often than lawyers. Where we saw Michael Avenatti go down. But I mean, not very often. Tanya, John is safe, chilling, right? Kit Kat, and the crazy award goes to Karen Reed and Alan Jackson. I don't think Alan Jackson is crazy. Maybe antisocial personality. I don't know. Seems to lack all feeling. Never seen him emotional. He fakes emotion, but we've never seen him really emotional.
She could have broken up with him. They could have talked about it the next day. Or like knocking on the door, like Kaylee said, getting the last word. She doesn't drive away. She takes that 6,000-pound Lexus and she makes a decision. And the decision is that she steps on the gas after banging it into reverse. Before we talk about what happens next, I want to talk to you a little bit about the charges in this case. And I hate to digress, but it's important so we really understand.
So this is where I'm really confused. This is where I get really confused. Listen to the way he talks about the charges. He talks about murder too.
And what we're talking about here. I have no authority to talk about the law in this case. The Honorable Judge Canoni will do that. But I want to talk to you a little bit about the charges. Don't rely.
Interesting. He says he has no authority to talk about the law, but Alan Jackson did, giving them instructions on reasonable doubt.
On my interpretation of the law.
All defense attorneys do that, but it's interesting. Interesting difference there, huh?
It's the judge who has that special power, but I want to explain to you a couple of things so when you think about what happens next, you can really assess the facts of this case with the charges against Miss Reed. She is charged with second-degree murder. It sounds ominous, it is. It's a serious charge, second-degree murder. When most people think murder, they think shooting or stabbing somebody. It's natural to think that. Second-degree murder is different. It's not first-degree murder. I told you at the beginning of this case, I told you that we were not going to suggest or try to prove that Miss Lee intended to kill John O'Keefe. That was never part of this case. We're not claiming that. I told you that we were not ever going to try to prove that she even intended to hit him. We never suggested we would try to prove that, and we're not trying to prove that she intended to hit him. We're not. What we are obligated to prove, and what we have proven from the evidence in this case, the second-degree murder, is that she intended an act, and that is putting the car into reverse and heading back towards John O'Keefe. She intended that act. The question then becomes, did her conduct create a clear, plain, strong likelihood of death? Late at night, dark, beginning to snow, under the influence of alcohol, knowing where she stopped and left him after an argument, heading back in reverse to the exact spot or right near where she left him at over 24 miles per hour, accelerating at over 75%. You need to ask yourself, are you convinced if somebody does that, does that create a plain and strong likelihood of death? And if there's no doubt in your mind that she intended to hit that accelerator in reverse, and if that conduct will create a clear and plain likelihood of death, then she's guilty of that crime. Whatever the label is, she would be guilty of that crime. Now think about this. Let me give you an analogy. If somebody, maybe a teenager, someone young, impulsive, is on a bridge and they see cars going by and they have a boulder and they want to throw the boulder off, they're not looking to hurt anybody. They're not meaning to kill anybody, but they throw the boulder off the bridge because they want to see the car break, the thrill. And when they throw that boulder off the bridge and it comes down and lands on the car, and there's somebody, passenger, anybody in that car, and it then goes through the roof and kills the person in the car, did they intend to kill that person? No, they were trying to have a thrill throwing the rock. Did they have the malice to want that person dead? No.
I think she had the malice. I think anger, he says it another time, anger can be inferred from the throttle, her foot 75% down on the pedal in reverse. I mean, you can see it in the closing. I always play, play a song at close, and I have those are Karen Reed's own words. To think that this wasn't planned is a mistake. The point was to teach John a lesson at minimum. Now she's throwing out a conspiracy, but when you lie, you often tell the truth. I think the plan was to teach John a lesson. Never wore a coat. You have to think, if you have a boyfriend who doesn't wear a coat, if you got seriously injured, things would be bad if snow was coming. And that's the interesting thing about the text messages between Karen and John that day. John keeps telling her, there's a storm coming. Nobody's going anywhere. There's a storm coming. What are you, the plumber? The plumber's not coming back tomorrow. There's a storm coming. There's a storm. He's telling her over and over and over again. Stay the weekend with me. And where does she go after hitting John with her 6,000-pound SUV? She goes to John's house. Sneaks in there. Hangs out. And, her laptop was never recovered, never searched. So did she sleep that night? Now her phone shows no movement, but she could have been on her laptop. Why would you be on your phone when you could be on a bigger computer? There's a mistake in the investigation.
They didn't. But that would be an example of second-degree murder. When you take a boulder and throw it off a bridge, there's a plain and strong likelihood of death. when Karen Reed, in the midst of that tension and fight, after she drove away and was gone, disengaged, when she came back for the last word, in the darkness, the beginning of the snow, under the influence of alcohol, and decided to stop her Lexus, decided to put it in reverse, decided to accelerate 75% in the exact same direction of where she left him, and then hit him, and he died. I suggest to you that is second-degree murder. The other charge, operating under the influence of alcohol, manslaughter. It's different. It's a totally different and separate charge. Was she under the influence of alcohol? And then secondly, did she operate her Lexus wantonly and recklessly in a way that would very likely result in serious injury? When you're under the influence of alcohol, and you drive a 6,000-pound Lexus in the heat of the moment at the direction of where somebody is, whether you intend to hit them or not, I submit to you that is wanton, it is reckless, and any reasonable person would think it's very likely that serious injury would result. It's not a matter of intending to kill. It's not a matter of intending to hit. It is the conduct of the operation and the risk that is created. And so those two charges are two of the three. The three is leaving the scene, knowingly causing death. And we'll get to that. So now, sadly, we need to get back to 34 Fairview Road where we left. We know from the tech stream data that you drove 33 feet at least, because it only picks up a 10-second window. And when it starts to pick up the data, we know she's driving at a speed. So it's more than 33 feet. We just don't know. And then when she comes back, she covers the 33 feet and 50 more. 80 feet. 80 feet. Over 80 feet. Now, nobody has ever suggested, even Dr. Welcher, when she collided with them. This data doesn't tell you collision. It's a 6,000-pound Lexus. It's a 216-pound man. It's not going to show a blip. It could have been in that 10-second window. It could have been 2 seconds after. It could have been 4 seconds after. But it's in that pocket of time, and we know it. We know it because when you reconcile the data with the phone, that 20 seconds is in the same window of that 10-second window coming back. So even if it's a couple seconds later, 4 seconds later, whatever Mr. DeSorgo wants, he stops moving. John O'Keefe stops moving forever. Forever. Have slide 6, please. You'll get to see this more closely, and you can probably see it where you're sitting, but there's important data. Data doesn't lie. And you will see acceleration, 75%. You will see speed, 24 miles per hour backwards. You will see distance, over 80 feet. That's what you're going to see in this data on that night. Anger, although not necessary in any of these charges, anger can be inferred for somebody to come back that hard, that fast, that reckless, that obvious, likely to create a plain and strong likelihood of death. That data tells a story that can't be changed, can't be attacked. ARCA, they did some crash tests on me. You know what else they do? Extreme data. There's nothing about that data that is uncertain. Nothing. Take that down, please. When Ms. Reed hits John O'Keefe, collides with John O'Keefe, we don't know if he went in the air a foot. We don't know if it was how much of a clip it was. We don't know if he stumbled back, but we know there's a collision. There's no doubt there's a collision because her taillight's all over the yard. It's all over the yard. And when he falls back and he hits the back of his head, his basal fracture. He's then lying there helpless. When Miss Reed leaves, she leaves behind tons of her taillight all over the yard. All over the yard. It's called the debris field. And you've seen videos. You can't replicate the exact contact. You can't, because you need where the person was hit, how fast the person was going, but you know what happened, because when you look at the debris field, when a light is broken, it's no different than what was on the front yard. It's no different. She leaves him behind. She leaves her taillight behind. She goes home. And on her way home, you know she's still angry. You know she's still angry because...
So here's what Karen Reed's charged with. 2nd-degree murder, manslaughter while operating a motor vehicle under the influence, leaving the scene of a fatal accident. Reed has pled guilty to all charges, including the third lesser, leaving the scene, I guess manslaughter while operating a motor vehicle under the influence, but clearly she was under the influence.
She starts leaving him voicemails. Slide 7, please. Healthcare starts at 12:31:56. 12:32:04 to 12:32:12 is the data, which is adjusted when you reconcile the clocks and the Alexis. 12:32:09 is when he closes his phone after looking at Jen McCabe's text. 12:32:16 is his last steps. The disorder says that red range should move a little bit, 2 or 3 seconds. They can move it 4 seconds, 5 seconds. It doesn't matter. It's all in the same window. It doesn't change. We can have slide 10, please. Can you play that, please? Thank you. Each one of those pegs represents 10 feet. You can't place that car where it was in front of Fairview. You just can't. The data doesn't tell you that, but that tells you the movements of that car. Now, as John O'Keefe sadly lays on the ground, abandoned, you're going to have to ask yourself a question for charge number 3, leaving scene, knowing somebody was injured and then died. You're going to have to ask yourself, is there evidence that Miss Reed knew that she had hit him? Don't need to prove it for murder 2. Don't need to prove it for OUI manslaughter. But for the 3rd charge, Commonwealth has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt she knew she hit him. We weren't there, but there was an eyewitness. There was a guide. And that eyewitness helped.
So she can be found guilty of each charge. So she can be found guilty of murder 2 and manslaughter while operating a vehicle under the influence and leaving the scene of an accident, causing serious injury or death. So yeah, she could, I think the reason she's charged that way is so that if they hang on one of the charges, they still have the other charges.
Tells us that she knew. And that eyewitness is Karen Reed herself. She tells you that she knew. We have slide 8, please.
Could I have hit him? Did I hit him?
How could that have been? I mean,
I don't know what that could have been. It was howling wind. I had YouTube blasting on the stereo. And I thought, did he somehow try to flag me down, which was the reaction I was hoping to garner as I slowly pulled away from the house? Did he come up and maybe trip or bend over to pick up his cell phone and I ran over his foot and then passed out drunk? I mean, I didn't think I hit him, but could I have clipped him?
So, I just lost my place. I was curious why they did not elicit any testimony more about her camera, the beeping. She makes the beeping sound in one clip that was played in court. I walked through garage and the sensors. She talks about the sensors on her car and how my understanding is that car turns down the stereo. And I think that would be important for the jury to know that that car turns down the stereo. When you play a clip like I had YouTube blaring, and you don't want the jury to think, well, maybe she didn't know she hit him. Clearly she knew she hit him because she knew right where he was. And what happened to him. She was the only one who knew that morning that something serious had happened to John O'Keefe.
When she left Fairview and left John behind, she didn't think he was mortally wounded. She knew she hit him. She knew she hit him. And so when she made her way back home, not only did she leave debris field all over the front lawn, but she took evidence with her too. Hair, DNA on the taillight, and she drove back to John's house. And she started calling on the way back, 12:33, just a minute and a half later. And then her messages show her anger. You see, this was John's fault. This was John's fault. And her phone calls tell you about the tone and the destruction of that relationship. 53 phone calls that night. 53 phone calls. Not one to 911. Not one to Jen McCabe, please go outside and try to help. Not one to a hospital. Not one to anybody but him. 53 calls.
And she never called 911. Jen McCabe called 911. I think it's important detail. If I were a juror, I'd be talking about that. Kit Kat says, look at her face when he says there were eyewitnesses. There was an eyewitness. Thanks, Kit Kat.
Slide 12, please. You play voicemail one, please. The calls keep coming. Cell phone temperature, 72 degrees. He's been outside now, not moving, on that cold, hard ground with his cell phone under.
Right, when they say, when the free Karen readers say there was no bruises, how about his brain? How about his brain? That was bruised. I mean, this is so chilling, this chart here. It's just, that's what John O'Keefe, you just see, I mean, that's like, you see just how quickly the battery temperature is going down and his chances for survival, which are already not great, just fade out.
The warmth of his body, the cold ground, 72 degrees. It tells you the story. As this temperature plummets and that cell phone battery is compromised, so is John O'Keefe. And him and his cell phone alone on that yard. 66 degrees at 12:45. It is plummeting. Ian Whiffen's taking a phone and putting it in a freezer, not a same analogy. The idea that means that John O'Keefe was in the house, absurd. 66 turns to 61 is 12:53. 48 unanswered calls from the defendant. He's not in at a party. He's not wrestling with Brian Higgins.
Right. That's a really important thing that innocence fraud does is it twists facts. It takes a little fact like that Ian Whiffen, just to see if a phone battery temperature would go down and how it goes down. He put it in a freezer. That's not the same as being outside and being, it's not the same at all. And of course, we'd have data if he walked into the house.
He's not in a fight. He's in a fight. His cell phone would be moving. There would be healthcare data. There'd be steps. If he got into the house in 20 seconds and his cell phone is found under his body the next day, then how would he get back outside? There would be more steps because this phone is working. The data is the data. There's nothing wrong with it. It's registering everything. The temperature, the movement, He doesn't go in any house. He can't go in any house. His phone never moves again. Voicemail number 3, please. Listen to this.
John, I'm feeling a fucking kid. Nobody knows what the fuck you are, you fucking pervert.
Did you hear that? Nobody knows where you are. It is 12:59. John O'Keefe has been on that lawn for about 27 minutes. She hasn't called anybody else, hasn't spoken, has no information. Nobody's called her. You'll see her phone records. And she says, nobody knows where you are?
That's a really good point. Really good point. There's the cover up. There's the cover up that he talks about in the opening.
She knows. She knows. Nobody does know where he is. Except her. Except her. Why is she asking nobody knows who you are? She is starting to get panicked because she knows.
Hey, Second Beach Gal. Did you see? Yeah, I played his video, Second Beach Gal, in the beginning. You must be coming in late. Did you see Matt Panic post about the jury sheet and the misdemeanor DUI charge not being on the first trial? Yes, that's what I opened it, talking about it. Thanks so much. Yeah, go back.
She hit him. I'm not suggesting she meant to kill him or for him to die, but she knows she hit him, and now he's not responding, and she's getting nervous, and she's getting anxious, and she's leaving call after call after call. He's not answering. He's not calling back. He's not even picking up the phone. And we know what's happening at this point. Panic, drunken denial, it's setting in. And so then we see the healthcare data from Miss Reed's phone. She doesn't move after 1 o'clock. She could be sitting, she could have fallen asleep, but she doesn't move for a while. But she wakes up. She wakes up early the next morning. Take that down, please. And when she wakes up, she doesn't call Jen McCabe and say, where's John? She doesn't call Brian Higgins, has his number, has been texting with him. Hey, was John at a party with you? Did you see John tonight? She knows exactly where she is, and she's frantic. So she wakes up Kaylee.
Oh, a little slip there. And she knows exactly where he is. I think he says she there.
That young girl at the time. And she says, she's panicked, she can't understand where she's saying, call Jen McCabe. Call Jen McCabe. Why is she calling Jen McCabe? She calls Jen McCabe. You know what she doesn't say when she calls Jen McCabe? When did he leave the house? What happened last night? No. She calls and says, I left him at the waterfall. I left him at the waterfall. See, now it's gone from panicked to self-preservation. I left him at the waterfall. And Jen says, left him at the waterfall? I saw you in front of the house. Click. Hangs up.
So that never happened. So let's go through how this happened. So first at 4:47, she calls Michael Camerano. No, I'm sorry. At 4:46, she calls Michael Camerano. Or does she text him? She calls him. No answer at 4:47, 4:47:57. She calls him again. 4:49. She calls him for the last time, unanswered. Then she calls Catherine Camerano. Because Catherine Camerano is not a witness, we don't hear about those calls this time. No, she wasn't called as a witness. Karen Reed called Michael Camerano's wife, Catherine, at 4:49:24 and says John didn't come home. And this call lasted 2 minutes and 51 seconds. And she's asking, where's Mike? And Catherine Camerano testified that she told Karen to calm down, and was rechecking the alarm at her house that she had said to Karen, referring to her husband, Michael, he's home. He's home with the kids. Let me call him. And at some point I hung up. I called my husband. She was at work. Okay. So at 4:51, there's a second call. Karen Reed's 2-minute and 51-second call to Catherine Camerano ended. At 4:53, John's niece called Jennifer McCabe. Jennifer McCabe could hear Karen Reed screaming, "Jen, Jen, Jen," as John's niece was telling Jennifer that her uncle did not come home. And the way Matthew McCabe, who was next to her, said, "I was awoken to the screaming of Jen, Jen, Jen. So when I woke up, I thought there was someone in my bedroom. I kind of snapped out of bed. What the hell's going on? Looking around the room, realized my wife was actually on the phone. It was loud enough to wake me up from a dead sleep. I could hear it. It was loud. Obviously, I was laying in my bed and realizing after my wife was laying right next to me on the phone, but it was a loud Jen, Jen, Jen. It was repetitive." Karen Reed told Jennifer McCabe that she and John had gotten into a fight and she had left him at the waterfall. Jen McCabe testifies that she remembered that. So in her confused and half asleep state, Jen McCabe told Karen that she was going to call Julie to see if John had ended up with Chris, then hung up with Karen to call Julie Albert, Chris Albert's wife. But because Jen McCabe was still half asleep and not thinking straight, she began calling Julie Albert until her husband said, "What are you talking about? We saw them outside your sister's." At which point Jennifer ended her call to Julie's phone before it was answered. So at 4:56, Jennifer McCabe called John O'Keefe's niece back. When on speakerphone, Jennifer McCabe told Karen Reed that she and her husband had seen her and John O'Keefe and her black SUV outside her sister's house at Fairway. Karen Reed said to Jen McCabe, didn't remember going there, and then she started to yell, "Jen, Jen, Jen, Jen." And then she was saying, "Did I hit him? Could I have hit him?" And then she proceeded to say she had a cracked taillight. The next call, we were informing the defendant, this is Matthew McCabe, that, "Wait, we saw your car. We saw you come to 34 Fairview. You guys were there." And I heard the response of, I don't remember going there. My wife had made a couple of phone calls, and one of the calls with Karen Reed, she blurted out that she broke her taillight, cracked her taillight, something to that effect. So at 4:56:39, niece and Catherine Camerano, I don't really know exactly. I don't, so there was no hanging up there. I mean, it's dramatic, but it didn't really happen. So she called Carrie Roberts at 5 o'clock and said, "John's dead, Carrie, Carrie, Carrie." Or Carrie, 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 John's dead. That's the second trial, the way she testified. This is all thanks to Innocence Fraud Watch. It's an excellent blog. She nails down these times. So Karen Reed seemingly hung up on Carrie Roberts because Catherine Camerano was calling her. That's why. It wasn't like she didn't want to be caught in a lie and she hung up. It's a good story, but it's just not true.
Hangs up. So then she calls someone that she doesn't know very well. She calls Carrie Roberts. But now she has to pivot because someone has seen her in the exact spot that John will be found soon. Whether she's the first one there or somebody else, John will be found. Maybe Lucky missed him. It's a snowstorm. You can't see, but someone's going to find him at some point. So she calls Carrie Roberts. It's no longer she left him at the waterfall. She pivots. She calls, "Carrie, Carrie, Carrie. John's dead. I think he got hit by a plow." Why do you think she chose those words? Why did she choose those words? Because she knew that there was a collision with a large motor vehicle, and she had to substitute her 6,000-pound Lexus for another big vehicle. I think he got hit by a plow. And so now we have the introduction of Jen McCabe and Kerry Roberts. Phone calls that they probably never.
Those details are important because it's making Karen Reed look like she's been caught in a lie and she's hanging up till she thinks of something better, when really it was to Kerry Roberts, and she's hanging up because Catherine Camerano is calling her. She's busy mixing it all up. It's a very different scenario.
Ever wanted. A worse nightmare to get a call like that. For what's going to happen, what they're going to see, what they'll never be able to forget. But because the defendant is John O'Keefe's girlfriend, they wake up in the middle of the night in a blizzard out of their kindness, their loyalty, their devotion to John O'Keefe. And when she calls them and tells them that she wants them to come out, this soccer mom with a perfectly normal life gets drawn into this whole farce, and she answers that call.
I loved it that he called it a farce. I think that's where I'm going to end it for tonight. Where are we? Yeah, I may deal with the second half tomorrow, but I think that's, but here's how to, it's a great, I think this will be looked at, even if Karen Reed gets off, as how to do a closing argument, how to connect with a jury used as a teaching tool. He already teaches, we know Hank Brennan teaches law. But it's important, those facts are important to keep credibility with the jury. And they're very important when there's an innocence fraud campaign, when they're calling the Commonwealth corrupt and liars and don't get caught out. You got to stick with the facts. The facts are important. You can't say facts matter. Facts matter, right? Remember that cross-examination that Hank Brennan did? Facts matter. Can't do a cross-examination saying facts matter. I'm not saying it will affect I don't know how it will affect the verdict, but those are weaknesses, some weaknesses in it. This is how they get over. They twist facts. They can turn it around. Look at how they exploited Hank Brennan's mistake on the hoodie. This is how innocence fraud campaign. He meant to do it. Every time there's a mistake on the Commonwealth, they meant to do it because Adam Lally made none of these mistakes. So a little appreciation for Adam Lally, a little criticism for Hank Brennan. He's a brilliant orator, a brilliant closing, brilliant opening, but he's used to being defense attorney. It's a really good example of he hasn't been a prosecutor for a long, long time. So, it's a very different thing. You got to stick with the facts as a prosecutor. You got the whole weight of the state power behind you. It's very different than being a defense attorney. And, they've really exploited it. Boy, did they exploit it in their clothes. You saw he called them a fraud. We know who's the fraud. But that's how they convince a gullible public. That's how innocence fraud campaigns work. That's what they exploit. That's why it's so important to get out the message. And so I don't understand why it wasn't arguing stronger for murder too, for all the charges, and actually I see, a little bit in retrospect, but he's like, you got a hard job. I think he's just, is it really that hard? It should be clear as day. It's clear as day. The evidence is clear as day. It shouldn't be that hard a job. No, I don't know. Those are my thoughts on it. Thanks, guys, for listening. Really fun to watch, though, isn't it? Isn't it fun to watch? Fun to watch. So we'll see how it turns out. But Certainly, I enjoyed it. We'll go back to Hank's powerful cross. I also have some things on the civil case tomorrow. John's niece, he's really the subject of the civil case. Her, she's suing for her emotional distress, her trauma that Karen Reed caused. So we'll talk about that tomorrow and talk about the possibilities of the civil case and look at it tomorrow. So we'll do some of this and some of the civil case tomorrow. That's what I'm thinking of, at least right now. Have a great night, everyone. Thank you for listening. Please support the channel. It really can't exist without you. It is very hard to be on this side of these cases. I will tell you, I don't get the big numbers, so I count on my audience, the ones who do appreciate it and do listen to support it. All the links are in the description, in this episode's description. You can send me a Venmo, buy me a coffee, or become a Patreon. Thank you to everyone who became a Patreon. Thank you to Tammy, who sent me a Venmo. I appreciate it. I will be back tomorrow at 6 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody.
I hit my boyfriend with my car. It wasn't an accident, but with lying lawyers I'll go far. Lying lawyers and witness harassment. I'll avoid prison. It was snowing. I pushed the pedal down, hit him hard. Now the legal system I clown. Innocence fraud campaign to save my skin. Making money, truth is my second victim. Carry, gin, like John, you were my mark. My innocence fraud campaign is my biggest hit. Yeah. I hit my boyfriend with my car. It wasn't an accident, but with lying lawyers I'll go far. Lying lawyers and witness harassment. I'll avoid prison. It was snowing. I pushed the pedal down, hit him hard. Now the legal system I clown. Innocence fraud campaign to save my skin. Making money, truth is my second victim.